Boa noite. Boa noite, gente. Tá frio, mas vocês têm que estar animados. Bom, hoje a gente tem a Masterclass, acho que a mais esperada, né? O futuro do entretenimento. Vamos falar sobre o futuro do entretenimento. Onde estivemos, onde estamos e para onde vamos. E o professor desta noite, nada mais, nada menos que o Glenn. Palmas para o Glenn. Glenn Gaynor foi chefe de produção física da Amazon Original Movies, Amazon Studios, um líder inovador com 30 anos de experiência no setor de entretenimento, fez do trabalho de sua vida a capacitação de contadores de história em todo o mundo. Ocupou cargos importantes de produção como chefe de produção física na Amazon IGM e na Sony Screen Gems, uma empresa da Sony Pictures, e é um membro presente da comunidade do entretenimento. Além disso, Gaynor co-criou um estúdio de inovação para a Sony e é membro da Academia of Motion Pictures Arts and Science. Foi homenageado na Expose Photography and Film Festival 2025, realizado nos Emirados Árabes. E recebeu o prêmio Social Impact Producer of the Year no Festival de Veneza 2024. Com vocês, Gaynor.
Good evening.
Oi. Oi, gente. I'm going to speak a little bit in Portuguese, then switch to English.
As you should. I think that's fantastic.
Oi, gente. Boa noite. Eu sou a Flávia Guerra e eu vou mediar essa conversa, essa masterclass com o Glenn. A gente vai falar em inglês, né? Se vocês precisarem de tradutores, né, dos aparelhinhos, estão ali fora já. Então, aí a gente vai conversar um pouco no começo. E depois, quando tiver um tempo, a gente vai abrir para algumas questões. Então, se tiverem questões, preparem-nas. Né? Glenn, agora eu vou trocar. Me desculpem que eu vou dar uma misturada, vez ou outra, que acontece. Quem estava aqui na segunda-feira no painel de distribuição viu, às vezes, a cabeça dá um tilt. I'm telling them that sometimes I mix, languages, but it's okay.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like a mix of languages. So, me and Glenn, we were discussing, some themes that he wants to talk about, and we feel that we have great opportunities, not only here today, but in São Paulo and in Brazilian film industry. So I think we should focus on this and what is, the future of the entertainment, as we say, and I think the future, and he will talk about this much better than me. There's a beautiful future for entertainment in Brazil, the Brazilian entertainment. So before starting the questions, I wish you could, tell us a little bit, how is São Paulo so far for you? How's this experience this week for you?
It is so incredible that when I arrived here, I was prepared to do this solo. And then I met Flavia, and I realized this is what a film festival is all about. This collaboration, meeting a brilliant person such as yourself, a journalist, a storyteller. We've had phenomenal dialogue talking about when you went to Vietnam and shot your first short film and the fact that you've been such a strong proponent of story. That, to me, is worth the trip. And so I first want to start off by saying thank you very much for obrigado for helping me tell the story tonight and having a dialogue, and then we'll open it up to the audience, because filmmaking is all about collaboration. Mm-hmm. This is not a one-person journey. And I've been blessed to tell stories for 30 years. I started telling stories back in the 20th century, if anybody can remember that far back. Yeah. the first, I started producing short films. I was a graduate of a film school in Los Angeles. The film school was called California State University, Northridge. And the first film that I produced actually occurred during the earthquake. And I had a lot of grip and electric equipment and a Mercedes-Benz that I borrowed from Mercedes-Benz of North America. And then that thing just hit hard. And immediately I tried to call the vendors and ask if the equipment was okay. They said, you can't get into Northridge. And then had to assess the situation. I called Mercedes-Benz and I said, did you hear about the earthquake? Because I don't know where your car is right now. And this first experience making a short film that had phenomenal production value taught me the importance of collaboration and the importance of physical production and so forth and so on. And so I started showing that film at the Directors Guild of America, at the Television Academy, and I wanted to be a writer at that time. And people said, that's great, we love your script, but that's a really well-produced film. Do you mind producing a short film for me? I got this actor Gary Busey and Harry Hamlin, and this D.W. Brown director, and his wife Joanne Barron is the #1 acting coach in California. And I read the script, I said, that sounds great. I charged them $50 a day and capped it at $500, because we don't do these stories for money. We do it for the love of the craft, and eventually you'll make an income on it. And that short film led D.W.'s wife, Joanne, to call Kenny G's wife, and they said, we want to do this improv film where we've got a treatment, kind of like the Larry Sanders Show, but we don't have a script. Do you mind producing it for me? And I loved the idea, and so we produced a $250,000 movie. And the director of that film turned me on to another director who had a film for $500,000, also an art house movie. And the producer of that next film introduced me to an organization called Film Finances, which put me on what was called an HBO list at the time. And eventually I started producing, $2 million films, and eventually got into the studio system. I can't explain the whole biography because we'll be here all night. But I ramble on about that because all of that is collaboration. All of that is being part of a community. And Sao Paulo has an incredible community. I've been meeting with film directors, producers, distributors, production service companies, visual effects, documentary filmmakers, and I'm having a blast. So that's a long way to say I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for everybody here.
Thank you. Well, I would say we are happy that you're here also. And I'm biased because I'm from São Paulo. But I don't think, I'm here because I agree, like that we have the best of São Paulo are the people. Not who are born in São Paulo, who comes to São Paulo. Like São Paulo is all Brazil and all the countries as well together. So I think, I agree with you, people make São Paulo special.
They do.
Yeah.
And the cafes.
Yeah, and cafes and food.
The food is incredible. Luis Toledo, he knows. This morning I said, we've got to get some bakery this morning. He took me to this incredible bakery. And I just was like, I got the camera, I'm like, with the phone, and I'm just videoing this. Like, this is insane.
But the bakeries, our padarias are an institution in São Paulo. You
Yeah.
know, we really take them seriously,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
So, I want to begin with a very technical question, but not only technical, because like Marilia, talked about, you are the head of physical production, which is quite interesting. We don't use that word a lot in Brazil, physical. We use producer, or line producer maybe, isn't it? Like executive producer in more general meaning. What does a physical producer does?
So it's a great question. I started physical production when I was president of physical production for Sony Pictures Screen Gems. So if you understand Sony Pictures, there's Columbia Pictures. She's the lady with the torch. Then there's TriStar. That's the horse. I had the label. I had the S. And my job was, it was kind of a fun job. that I had no choice but to take, I'll be honest with you, because I was producing movies. And I was responsible for physically making the films, meaning I would read the script, meet the filmmakers, figure out how to make it, get a cost analysis, decide where to make it, and so forth and so on. And it's very interesting, actually. I remember an old friend of mine at 20th Century Fox. That's a studio that doesn't exist anymore. It was called, in the old days, 20th Century Fox. It's now 20th Century, which is a Disney property. But he gave me the script, and I'm in his bungalow, and I read the script, and he said, so how much is it going to cost, and how are we going to make this? And I said, well, I haven't talked to the director yet. And he said, I'm not asking the director. I'm asking you. So then I gave him my answer, and it was the first experience I had with a studio executive who was very blunt about it. It's like, you know, we have our opinion. I'm asking you, how are you going to make this? Where are we going to make this? And how much is it going to cost me? And I was doing a lot of films in that capacity where filmmakers would come to me with the script, with their idea, and I would figure out where in the world to make the film. I once gave a speech in Amsterdam, and I opened up speaking in Dutch, and I was opening some function, and I said, guys, I had to make a very important motion picture in Amsterdam that could only be made in Amsterdam, and I made it for Columbia Pictures, and that movie was called Deuce Bigalow, European Gigolo. And they all go, oh yes, we remember that film, right? So it's a very silly film with Rob Schneider, but I was the one who determined that when I read the script, even though it was a funny movie that could have been shot in Bulgaria or anywhere else, I said, well, guys, I know how to make this film where you scripted it to be. And we shot a $20 million movie back then in 2003 for about 65 days in Amsterdam. And the reason I was able to make it is because I employed a Dutch cinematographer. I didn't bring a Hollywood cinematographer. We employed a Dutch production service company. Every head of department was from Amsterdam. And that gave us the affordability index to produce that picture. I will say that I had, at one point in making that film, I had 2 presidents of the studio with me. And they weren't sure if they liked the script. And they said, well, what do you think? We give it to the lady with the torch, or we give it to the horse? They gave it to the lady with the torch.
Yeah, but that's something quite interesting. Like, you trust the people in Europe. What I think it's a very important quality you have to like to be a producer and also a physical producer. You need to find the right people as well, don't you?
You do, and you have to listen to what's important. So making that particular picture, it's a comedy. And the studio president at Columbia Pictures said, well, you know, Amsterdam, don't they have dark brick buildings, and isn't it overcast sky, and it's got to be funny. I need a lot of color. I said, they're also famous for flowers. And we'll make sure there's beautiful flowers in all the shots. And we'll make sure the water pops. And inside the structures, it'll be, you know, mahogany and beautiful colors. And I'll get a cinematographer who shoots commercials and understands that. And that's what we delivered.
And everybody watched it. I watched it. I think everybody knows the film.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's exactly it.
It worked. So, you know, there's something I always think, and I think here in Brazil, like our reality, in many cases, is changing, you know, little by little, but it has changed a lot. Like, we have this kind of, you know, design productions that, you know, the director was the producer, the writer, the line producer, and the director, maybe the editor, you know, like and we are in an environment that things are changing. We have more producers, physical producers also. And but also, do you think this kind of, you know, job needs a creative person as well? Not only the person who watch and pay attention to the numbers and the cost, but also logistic, but also the story. What do you think about this?
I always put story first. And, you know, that's why I think of the 45 movies I produced, only once was I credited as line producer. I was mostly credited as executive producer. The job of a producer is to understand how a film is made. you know, in America we have a title called unit production manager as well. And it's interesting, the production manager was a job born from the studios. Production managers actually were employed by the studio to manage the production. And then they had a producer who understood what the camera needed to do, what actors they needed, how to fix a story. A well-rounded producer actually understands the totality of which they're about to mount. And, you know, in Hollywood, you know, I'll admit, we have an incredible institution that has been around for about 110 years, and that has the studio executive. And it's something that's hard to replicate. And I've had a lot of friends who have been studio presidents at these big studios. One of them told me at one of those swanky Hollywood restaurants called Dantana's, over 2 margaritas.
It helps.
It helps. He said, and this guy worked at Columbia Pictures for a long time, probably 20 years. He said, the job of the executive is to make sure the director never looks at me and says, why did you let me make that mistake?
Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes the director
honesty.
doesn't listen.
You know, you just try to say, you know, look, I would encourage you to do this or to consider that. You know, you don't want to dictate, but you never want the director to come back to you and say, why did you let me get in trouble like that? Why didn't you stop me? I could have been producing, I could have been directing this all this time. So you want to keep them out of trouble, and you want to empower them, because your job is to empower that story. You want to be as frugal as possible, so you can put as much on the screen as possible, and you want it to be repeatable, and you want to know that at 0700 the next day, the trucks will be there and you'll be shooting.
You always read the script first.
Always read the script first, and always be thoughtful about how to achieve it. I worked once with a director named Phil Tippett, who got the Academy Award for inventing Go Motion for Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, you know, the roller coaster shot. He actually shot that with a Nikon camera with the back blown out, with a film canister in the back, and he made that roller coaster shot look great, but he put a blur into it. So I had the honor of actually producing a picture with him, and his partner, John Davison, who did a film called Starship Troopers, asked me to produce Starship Troopers 2. And he read the script, and I said, okay, we could shoot that on stage. There's a 18,000, or I think it was an 18,000 square foot stage in Manhattan Beach. And we could shoot a big chunk of this 70% on stage. And Phil said, well, why don't we go out on location on this one, and why don't we go out on location on that one? And John said, Phil, you have 2 choices. You can drive or you can shoot. Which one do you want? He said, I'd like to shoot. I said, I thought you would say that. Let's go to the stage.
Wise.
That's wise, but he didn't tell him. He gave him choices.
Yeah. It's a very tricky way.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. You know, like we are always listening to this as Brazilians, and this is the year that we got an Oscar, and it's a very symbolic year, I think. We won 2 prizes in Cannes, 1 prize in Berlin. We have a respected cinema since many decades ago, but I think you can agree with me, we are listening more and more, like, think locally and globally at the same time. Tell stories who are very Brazilian, you know, have the Brazilian terroir, you know, but also work, you know, abroad. How do you see this, not only for Brazilian films, but also, you know, I think Hollywood films do this very well. But how do you think we should, you know, tackle this and understand by listening to this?
There are so many incredible stories. Let's go back to what we talked about. You asked me what my experience is in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo, to me, is a major city like Manhattan. And for some reason, I have been trained that people fall in love in Manhattan. And I haven't seen people on screen fall in love in Sao Paulo. When I was helping to run Sony Picture Screen Gems. The marketing people, when I got these rom-coms, would say, you have a choice of LA, London, Paris, Rome. That's where people fall in love.
People fall in love here.
I have heard.
It does happen.
So now, somebody told me that just 2 days ago, and I was shocked. I said, that's not what Hollywood taught me.
Yeah, that's true.
We need to tell those stories. This is an incredible city that has incredible people. People go to work, high rises, urban environments. All the stuff you've seen in Manhattan, all the stuff you've seen in Paris is here in Sao Paulo. And we need to start to tell those stories. Tell those stories with a sense of urgency. Tell those stories that translate. You know, the World Health Organization says that 80% of the world is going to be in an urban environment, meaning an urban kitchen, the same refrigerator, the same microwave oven, the same cars. All of that stuff translates. And you know what else translates? Is love. And Hollywood has exported love for over 100 years. You fall in love with Indiana Jones. You fall in love with Luke Skywalker. And you learn to love some of the villains. All of these things translate. And so we joke about this, but we're being quite sincere that we need to start telling those stories here. They will translate because we all have that in common all around the world.
Do you think, and when we say this, we are also discussing about Korean films, you know, and everybody here remembers, you know, the Parasite, Oscar, and but not only because it could end there, you know, and Korea is still working and doing well, you know. Squid Game just released the new season and is massive. I didn't see yet, but it's massive. And do you feel we can do the same? Like because we are discussing a lot about how films are being produced everywhere. Like Hollywood is doing this since decades ago. I remember the first time I was writing about a Hollywood film filmed in Hungary, for example, or in Canada. I remember when the Canada wave started and we were like, oh, this film is New York, but it was shot in Toronto, for example. So, and I really, I know it sounds cheesy, but for me it's like Hollywood is an idea. You know what I mean? Like it's a way of making films, organizing the crews. And do you think we can not reproduce Hollywood, but have other, you know, Hollywoods, like a very Brazilian Hollywood or Korean Hollywood? How do you feel about it? Nothing, you know, to compare, but to have our industry.
So we'll start at the beginning of that question with Korea. You're right. So the Korean filmmakers actually embarked on stories that are very specific to Korea. Squid Games leaned into Korean culture. Their games, their cookies, their songs, these were things that were very specific to Korea. So, okay, that's interesting. We might be curious, but that didn't bring us in. We didn't watch it because of the way the guy cut the cookie. We watched it because we all understood that fear. We all have that primal instinct. In the Academy Award-winning film Parasite, we watched a family unravel in front of us with love and greed and jealousy, and we all understand those emotions. And that is why those films and those shows traveled. And so when you talk about Hollywood being an idea, and what you mean by that is that a Hollywood film is not a film shot in Hollywood. It is a film produced perhaps by a Hollywood producer with the Hollywood mechanisms of the format of the screenplay, the 3 acts, the sense that we start off perhaps with a world that's going great. My character is having a fantastic day. And then I fall down the sewer. And I have a terrible day. And then I have a challenge in front of me. And then you watch me try to mount that challenge. And just as I'm about to make it, I fall down again. That's the middle of the third act. And then just before the film ends, mathematically, I've solved it all. I'm good. You're happy. You go home. So that's a format. It's almost like a mathematical equation. Or as Mel Brooks once said, the difference between comedy and tragedy, it's comedy when someone else falls down the sewer. It's tragedy when it happens to me.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that allows us to tell great stories that can travel anywhere. So you can have that locality. The globality is what we all have in common. And that's not just that we all might love race car movies or love Formula One. It might be that we all have been in some kind of relationship. I think back of the Harrison Ford film Frantic, where Harrison Ford is in Paris, and he's a doctor, and his wife is kidnapped, and he just wants to get his wife back. That's the whole pitch. Not too complicated, but the way Roman Polanski put the film together, he gave us a compelling thriller. It could have been a Brazilian doctor. That translates. So look for those stories and what translates around the world, the commonality that we all have in common.
And I think you agree. And what makes us local can be our strength, don't you think? Like, our Oscar film, No, I'm Still Here, is a very local film in a way. It talks a lot about our reality, our dictatorship period. But it's also very universal because it talks about the mother, kids. It's
That's
quite
right.
simple. If we say this, it sounds very cliche, but it worked.
It worked. I'm an Academy member, and I voted for it. I loved it.
Thanks.
And I loved it because it was her story. She's trying to find her husband. In the background, in the backdrop, is a political story. But that's not why we fell in love with it. We fell in love with it because it's a well-crafted, beautiful film about a woman in a stressful situation, keeping her family together, her children, and how they adapted. And that is a powerful story that deserved the Oscar.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was like a, talking from our perspective, it was a milestone, definitely for us. And we are working here together. I know we are here also to keep up, and also to improve and to increase, because sometimes we feel like we have this, desire that is kept, and the desire to tell more story, universal story, to be more seen. And I travel, to international film festivals, and I've never seen Brazil. This year, Brazil was the country of honor in the market, in the Cannes marché, in the biggest market on earth, or whatever. And we have this good energy towards us, and I think we should, take advantage of it.
I fully agree. The world is excited to see stories from Brazil. And there's more to Brazil than just Rio de Janeiro, which is lovely. There's more to Brazil than the rainforest, which we need. But there are stories right here. And this is the power of story. I've been told as I travel the world that, what Hollywood has done well for America is tell the American story. Everybody around the world knows about the Wild West in the 1890s, and they know about San Francisco and Dirty Harry, and they know, so much of America's history because America somehow had this Hollywood machine telling those stories around the world. And so when you look at the power of story here, we now see that Brazil is waking up and ready to tell its story. It has the skill set. It has the craft. As you said, and I was at Cannes this year as well, people were talking about the Brazilian films. The world's ready. And I feel it, and I feel it here, and that's why I'm here. And that's why I was very excited to accept the invitation and to take part of this. This is meaningful. I knew this would be a meaningful moment in my life as well. This is not, you know, as we said, this is a collaborative process. I'm taking in the culture, I'm learning the stories, and I'm watching people pitch me, you know, stories that are exciting. But remember, it's not the backdrop that we're interested in. It really is that singularity. It's not, you know, you don't pitch a genre. You don't pitch a bunch of images. Whatever you're pitching a human story, something that has impact, something that is urgent. We know how noisy the marketplace is. The world is very noisy, and you've got to cut through that noise.
It's interesting when you say stories that are urgent, because when we listen to this word, it means like urgent in terms of like it's like a news, hard news, you know. It's not about being very urgent in terms of hard news, for example. It's like a story that needs to be told. Do you agree with this?
That's right. You know, again, our time is being cannibalized with video games, verticals, which are the, you know, long phone formats. It's being cannibalized with just pure social media. We know YouTube is the #1 watched platform. It doesn't mean that the influencers all on YouTube are making a fortune. I think only 5% can actually sustain themselves on YouTube. But it shows you that we're in this generation where we're clicking and swiping and doing all kinds of things. And there's a commitment to going to the cinema. You've got to tell people that there's something in the cinema that is valuable in some capacity. And it can be the next Blair Witch movie. It doesn't have to be a political story or as you said, hard news. It can just be something that compels you to say, I need to stop what I'm doing. I need to be part of this conversation. I need to see what they made. It doesn't have to be expensive. There's many ways to create production value. But be thoughtful about that and get that story out and think about the marketing. Think about who you're making it for. When I was at Screen Gems, I think we did something very well. We focused on what we call the core audience, right? There's always a core audience of anything you're making. There are certain people who are core audience of a genre. They might love rom-com, they might love horror films. It could be a core audience to a specific ethnic background. We made films such as Think Like a Man that celebrated Black American acting. But that film also had the crossover audience, people with varying backgrounds. But be truthful to what you're making. Make sure you get the core audience. They start celebrating the film. They start telling their friends who are not part of the core audience, and say, oh, I'm curious about that now. And then they see it, and then it rises to the top. But think about how to penetrate that marketplace as well. Mm-hmm. We sometimes would take our films and do screenings in colleges. They could have been colleges that were very specific to the theme of the film. And then the students talked about it and wrote about it, and that groundswell occurred. So you still have to think about why you're making it, who you're making it for, how are you going to get it to them. You've got to understand the marketplace, the value. You know, one of my friends who runs a company that does all the marketing just about for Hollywood films said there are no bad films. There are only films that cost too much.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you want to make a film that's a nuanced movie and it's a slice of life and it's for a smaller audience, make it for the price that's affordable. Mm-hmm. But make it.
It's quite interesting what you just said, because we also think, like in terms of budget, we need to make independent films in most of the case. We need to be very strategical. You know, so how do you think we can have great production value with a low budget? Because I think the great majority of people here are thinking about this also, you know.
Mm-hmm. Smaller grips.
Smaller grips.
Mel Brooks actually once said the hardest thing about making a film was putting all the holes in the side of the film, because there are like a million of them, right? Yeah. But you don't even have to worry about film anymore. There's an affordability index that does exist today that didn't exist before. Think of the crew size. I mean, I will say there was an old MGM executive who said that the reason why Hollywood films became more expensive is because they used twice as much crew as they did in the 70s and the 80s. Just be mindful of every decision you make. Get what you need, not what you want. And really be frugal. Think about the production value of walking down the street and getting the permit that's required and having police protection if you need it. Be safe. But think about all the things that would drive somebody to see the film and do it in the most affordable manner. By the way, sound stages, ironically, can be cheaper than being on location in someone's apartment because then you don't have to worry about being kicked out of the apartment at a certain time. So just be thoughtful of every step you take.
Do you have some example you could share with us that you just have an idea that solved some problem with like a budget for you? Like, for example, one example, I was talking to a British director. She just made a film called Hot Milk, and the book story, is set in Spain. But she didn't have the budget to film in Spain. It was much more expensive, and the Greek government had a program that she shot in Greece, pretending it wasn't in Spain. And it worked. Sometimes it doesn't. We have Emilia Perez, the case. I'm not saying about the film, just the production value.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Sometimes in this case it did, and I was like, I didn't get that was Greece. She made it very, in a very clever way. But just like my example that I was thinking, you must have thousands of it.
One of my favorite examples was a movie called About Last Night. We had to shoot it all at night. I decided to go to 6th and Main in downtown Los Angeles, park the trucks, and 80% of the movie was shot in the corner of 6th and Main, yet you didn't know you never left that street corner. I just had a city block, and everywhere I looked was somewhere different, someone else's apartment. Film looked wonderful. It was big. There were so many restaurants. Could you imagine Sao Paulo, parking in the trucks, and all the diversity you get within 2 or 3 blocks? You could make the Sao Paulo story like Woody Allen's Manhattan in an area of 2 blocks, right? Just get that diverse location. Just don't move as much. Those kinds of thoughtful decisions really do help. And yes, you can cheat locations. There's no question. You can look at the affordability index of other currencies, tax credits, and so forth and so on. But be mindful, because sometimes it costs too much money to move. So, there's no one right solution. But I think the job of the producer and the filmmaker is just to be thoughtful during that process. It's that old adage of measure 3 times, cut once.
I want to listen to your cases, but I was thinking about, Formula One, the film, Brad Pitt film. They spent like $300 million, I think, because they were traveling all the circuit. But it's in the story.
It's in the story. Actually, it was in Abu Dhabi when they were shooting during the race. They gave us incredible production value. No, and that's the luxury of the larger studios. They can do that. But I know you could do a motorcycle film here. You don't have to be Formula One. There's so much incredible opportunities in Sao Paulo. Just again, be careful with the stunts. Make sure you bring in the top heads of department who've been there and done that. And I will say, as a producer, if you're in a situation when your stunt coordinator says, I can do this, and the first assistant director says, she can't do that, do not make the decision for either one of them. Call somebody else and get a third opinion and then execute it. Because you want to have that complexity, but you want to have that complexity in the safest environment.
And at the end of the day, like you said in the beginning, we will work with people. You need to know how to work with people, isn't it? It's not an easy job, because sometimes, as you say, you need to talk to some people, to other people, to think together.
That's
it's
right.
not a decision that you make alone.
That's right. But the expertise is here. And if it's not here, you know, that's the great thing. We are a global community. Call me, you know. I'll put you in touch with somebody.
You know, numbers here.
1-800.
Yeah, and vocês têm perguntas? Do you have any questions? Can we open to questions? Acho que ela ali, ó. Você vai perguntar em português?
In English.
English.
I'm sorry, in English.
Acho que ela vai perguntar.
Hello, I'm here. I'm right here. To your left-hand side.
There we go. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your talk. And I'm very worried about an issue that you must have been asked many times. How will AI influence filmmakers' lives and filmmaking?
It's a very poignant and very important question. I have spoken about this. I spoke about this in London and Abu Dhabi, and I've been, and a lot of government entities are talking about artificial intelligence. AI is a tool like any other tool, but it is magnified at this point. Human intelligence and human emotional intelligence needs to go on top of anything you touch with artificial intelligence. I do believe that the solution of protecting humanity, human jobs, human inspiration, a lot of that's also going to be in the hands of legislators around the world. There was a case a few years back, for instance, before AI, where a photographer put a camera in the jungle so that a primate could take a selfie. And it was a brilliant photograph. And the photographer was very excited about this picture and started to license and sell the picture. And I believe it was People for Ethical Treatment of Animals said, stop, you don't own the picture. The primate took the picture. The primate owns the copyright. And so all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the courts ruled that it was the human who put the machine there for the primate to press the button, one. And two, the copyright laws are written to protect humans. And so that means that in order to have an image that can be subjected to the copyright, we need a human. That means production designers have to create it. It has to be an original human piece of artwork for it to have a copyright. So if we then look beyond legislation and look at, again, this tool, we have to recognize that artificial intelligence at this point is basically looking backwards and compiling information. We don't always know where it's getting its information. It can be hallucinating on something. It can be giving us wrong information. It can be guiding us down the wrong path. So what I encourage is that use it as a tool. You can check things out just like you go to Google Maps, just like you do research. We also know that AI does use 7-8 times more power than a simple Google search, but it does have a usage case. But put your human intelligence on top of that. Check it with colleagues. I will also say on the positive side, artificial intelligence in some capacity may start to empower stories and storytellers where they couldn't have afforded to do something previously. But again, I encourage everybody to understand, where is the AI getting its source? And can you trust the source? And can you trust the copyright? Is it ethical? For instance, if you're grabbing images, are the people who created those images that are being transformed into this AI mashup, are they being financially rewarded? So these are all very deep ethical questions. And I think we all have to continue to grapple with this. So I hope that's a helpful answer.
Thank you.
You know, I'll continue on our topics, and it comes together with like gaming and immersive films, immersive words. You worked once in Sony Innovation Studios, and I wish you could bring a little bit about your experience there. How can we put together, you know, like immersive gaming, AI now, with films? Like, how can we make them to work together?
The technology is all around us, and when I created Sony Innovation Studios, the idea was to collapse geography to allow us to shoot in many locations around the world or anywhere in the world in one facility. We're seeing a lot of that with volume walls and so forth and so on, but I'll tell you, volume walls have an expense to them as well. And the technology you're going to invest in will have a shelf span of about 3 to 4 years before it's obsolete, and then you've got to continually refresh it and so forth and so on. So everything has a positive, everything has a negative. You know, one of the most famous shots in a movie was Dustin Hoffman walking down the streets in Midnight Cowboy, and a car almost hit him, and he said, "Hey, I'm walking here." That was not scripted. That just happened. That's not going to happen in a volume wall. So, you know, there's a lot to be said about happy accidents. Let's make sure we don't lose those organic moments and be true to what you're trying to achieve. Clearly, if you're making a science fiction film and you've never been to the planet Druidia or whatever that planet is, a volume wall and technology may make a lot of sense. But Dune went to the Kingdom of Jordan. Dune went to Abu Dhabi. So, you know, clearly that was more of a powerful image for Denny than a volume wall. So these are just opportunities. These are options.
Once more, we are in São Paulo. You just talk about São Paulo as a, you know, a place where many stories are told and need to be told, but also Brazil, we can have like great production value also all over the country. It's such a huge country, isn't it? Like we have desert, we have forest, we have even snow in the south.
There is a sense of truth when you go to that location, and I think that will always be the case. You know, we can't stick our heads in the sand. This technology is here, and there's a lot to be thoughtful about. But again, if you are confident in your story and how you want to tell it, then tell it the way that makes sense. Tell it in the most honest way you can. That's what's going to drive in the audience. And it's still a human story that you're telling at the end of the day, even if it's an entirely CGI film or an AI film. That story better be about heart.
It's interesting, you know, we are trying to find, you know, the gold formula of like producing, you know, thinking about how to make the best film with great solutions. And at the same time, I feel like at the end of the day, like a producer, you are a physical producer, you need to have this wisdom, sometimes like to, you know, choose the right scene. Like this, we need to shoot on location. This we can do on studio. This we can left behind. This, you know, do you feel like it? Like it's a very human work. You know what I mean? Like it's very hard, as you said.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I was watching a film with Clint Eastwood at the Directors Guild of America. John Ford was in the film, John Ford directed. John Wayne was in the film called Stagecoach. And it's a famous shot that they shot in Monument Valley where it's a wide shot of John Wayne and the camera's pushing in, and then you see John and, you know, he flips the gun and so forth. It's the most technically flawed shot. We're talking about technology. The shot's terrible. Half of it's out of focus. Actually, 80% of it is out of focus. The wide shot was good. As it pushes in, it's out, it's out, it's out, it's out, and then there's John Wayne and it's back in focus. We would have thrown that away. That made John Wayne a star. So sometimes a technically flawed image is okay if the emotion is there. Again, all of that trumps technology. All of that is more important than the technology.
But your job, and I think it's very tricky in this sense, because that's it. Sometimes it happens, but you are the one, not only the one, but you the one who always thinking strategically. You know, this kind of work.
Mm-hmm. But we can do that. That's the talent is here.
Yeah. So, more questions?
I make my question in Portuguese.
Pode falar.
Então, sobre tudo que o Glenn está apresentando, né? Tudo que o Glenn está apresentando tem um conhecimento excelente, né? Em otimização dos custos, em até conceber a importância do cinema e a internacionalização, né, do cinema, né? O mundo global em que nós vivemos, né? E até em contextos de entrada no multilateralismo, né? Minha dúvida em questão a quem tem esse conhecimento, essa habilidade na otimização do custo, é de que o Brasil, numa necessidade de incentivar o cinema, né, tem tramitado projeto de lei para promover uma taxação, né, sobre os negócios, né, do streaming, né, a lei do streaming, né, que envolve a Condecine, né, em aplicar um percentual a ser definido ainda, né, mas que seria uma solução importante. Seria uma forma de projetar uma forma de financiamento no Brasil, baseado no fato de que o mercado aqui no Brasil, bem dominado pela Netflix e pela Amazon, né, tem faturamento bilionário, né. Eu gostaria de saber do Glenn, né, como ele tem visto essa dinâmica, né, tipo, essa forma de otimização de custo, essa forma de faturamento e essa situação de taxação, conforme a nação onde esse mercado, né, do streaming atua, né? Como ele vê isso no caso do Brasil e no mundo afora?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I don't want to speak on behalf of the streaming networks, and I don't want to delve too much into local politics because I'm not as an expert as I should be. But I will say, on a global basis, countries around the world, France, a lot of countries in the EU, they do levy taxes in some way. I'm not sure exactly how. There are incentives in various ways. I know Brazil has a few mechanisms, actually, on how it can incentivize productions here through Brazilian taxes that inspire people and companies to invest in cinema. And I think it's an incredible opportunity that Brazil has in its current legislation. I'm quite excited about it. I think still at the core is that, and from my experience traveling the world, is that the best story will always rise to the top no matter where it is in the world. That an incredible script can be purchased and produced here. It can be purchased by a Hollywood studio and then brought back here. Great stories always rise above their financial challenges. I've learned that in Hollywood as well, and I think it's important to know that, as I've had this in conversation with French friends, I said to them that I admire very much that they support the arts, and I said, in Hollywood, if I make a bad film and do it again and again, I'm out of business, and my studio is gone. And so I was trying to show my appreciation for their system. And he said, well, on the other hand, because you don't have support from the government, you make films for the world, and we make films for ourselves. So it's all a balance. The key is to be best in the craft, because no matter what we do, no matter where we live, and no matter how we're supported, we are, as you said, competing with nothing but world's champions. That ability to crack through that noise is happening, as you said. You guys got the Oscar. So I think there's always more to be done, but we as artists must be compelled by our own work as we continue to work with with legislation and whatever would make sense for the community.
I agree. And talking about this, how do you think we can have, because films about stories, but they are also visual. Like how do you, from your perspective, can find film, you know, visually compelling story? What makes for you, what are the ingredients that make, you know, a truly great story, like the story that fit the frame, as we say, like a great story? Maybe from your perspective, personal perspective, or as a professional?
Well, again, you just go back to your own core values and what is offered here in Sao Paulo, what is offered in the country, and what will travel. And we are seeing that. So it's just going to be, I think we're going to see more opportunities. I think that people are starting to realize what travels. And again, I'm very excited about the opportunities.
Like you just said, like you can film like a Blair Witch project with a small camera, or.
But even in a Blair Witch project, it was a singular face. It was a singular image, right? It was, again, we were rooting for that one person. So don't get off balance here about you know, fancy images. You know, you just need the singular force. That's what's bringing people in.
That's true.
Uma pergunta simples. Qual o futuro do entretenimento?
This is our main question. She said, I have a very simple question. Honest, what's the future of entertainment? But that's
keeping us on track. Yeah. Thank you for keeping us honest.
Yeah. That's the end of the rainbow.
That's right.
We're
the future of entertainment really is going to be the fact that we do know what exists today. Yes, there is a dominance in those who distribute stories on a global basis. Those companies are going to be secure. They're going to continue. Not all of them will survive. There's going to be a change in distribution. There's going to be a change in the studios that we understand today. They continue to change. We know in Hollywood there are studios that are trying to sell themselves from one entity to another entity, and they may not know what they're going to make in a couple of years outside of some of their strong IPs. Hollywood will continue to make major motion pictures, and there will be emerging new content players, distributors. There's going to be a new studio born somewhere in the world. We know there are 8 studios today representing 8 billion people. I do think there's room for another company to come in and be representative of continents and cultures and languages and thoughts. There's going to be a microcosm of new opportunities, sub-channels, sub-genres. Remember, there's 8 billion of us. There's a way to get through that noise. So we're going to see the emergence of new opportunities, new channels, companies that don't exist today. They're going to be continually evolving. We're just at the beginning. This is us learning to talk. That's the beginning stage. So I'm very excited about the future of entertainment. That's why I'm here, because we're going to continue to magnify our voices.
You're very optimistic. I really mean it. It's really inspiring, because your question is a great question, because I think because it's simple, like, I think you agree with me. We are anxious about the future of entertainment, because we are a generation that are facing many changes in quite a few times. Like, film was film for many decades, then became digital, then became vertical, as you said. Then now there's AI, that's gaming, that sometimes we feel lost.
Yeah, no, there's no question. We do. Because it's very easy to look at the future in a dystopian way. The human brain simply takes what is happening, magnifies it, and assumes nobody's going to do a damn thing. But a person who practices future foresight is the one who says, okay, I can see if we don't do a damn thing, this is our dystopia. But somebody's going to be smart and is going to encourage us to add a little bit of an element here to allow us another opportunity. And that's the thing. We didn't have electric cars a decade ago the way we do, and now we do. We weren't able to do so many things that we do today that we do now. Cinema, the theaters don't have to be what they are today. They can be pop-up theaters. There's so many ways to change the dynamic. And I'm actually, the reason why I'm optimistic is because I see these changes happening around the world. It's happening in the Middle East. It's happening in emerging territories. They're discovering that the power of story is so important that they won't let it die. And that can happen in a very dense community, such as the community that we're in today. That's why, by the way, there were hundreds of people seeing a theater, a play, tonight. That's why the deli was over capacity this morning when I was trying to get a croissant. People are out there. They want to do things. It's our job to compel them to be with us.
I love what you said about the theater, because I'm always tell people, like, cinema is not going to die. It's changing. It's more an experience. As you say, I like the idea of a pop-up cinema. Like
exactly
that.
it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be 400 people in a very expensive theater. Bring it to a community that doesn't have the affordability index to have it. And literally, and I'm seeing this again. I've seen 50-seat theaters showing regional movies, and they're doing well.
Do you think, you know, it's very personal, but I spent all the pandemic making a lot of interviews with executives from all over the world, talking about the future of cinema, because in the pandemic we are really in the dark. So we were desperate, we didn't know, and we were talking about how cinema can be an experience. People will go to the movies as an event with friends, we go to the parties or to the play. Do you feel about it? How do you feel about this? Like you just mentioned the pop-up cinema. I always say like film festivals are important for audience.
And there are more and more film festivals occurring. This is an incredible positive thing. We're all here tonight. This experience, this shared experience shows us that cinema is alive and it's well. Storytelling is alive and it's going to do well.
Also on cinemas, on public experience, as you said. Not
That's right.
Because people are, I love streaming. I think everybody does. I think it doesn't need to be this or that. It can be this and that.
That's right.
Like streaming complementary to the movies.
All of this is complementary. And we want cinema to do well. We want the big movies to do well. We want the art house movies to do well. We all need each other. That's the amazing thing. We all celebrate when a film does well. When you know, and I've seen films such as Captain EO, which came out of Italy, but it was a story of the African diaspora of two boys traveling up the continent on their way to Italy. You don't think of that as an Italian film. That was their choice for the Oscar for that year. So let's get out of our comfort zone. Let's make powerful films.
It's a great film. Sabem que filme? O Capitão, do Matteo Garrone. And it's on streaming, I think.
And that is streaming. Yeah. That's right.
It's a great
and everybody film. And people around the world know that story. So, you know, I think that we've had incredible questions today, and you know, I leave tonight feeling even more inspired, to be honest with you. And I would love to hear any more questions, because I don't want to banter without being connected to what the sense of urgency is here tonight.
So, firstly, good night.
Não, pode fazer. É que eu estava apontando. Tem ele e ele.
So, my question is about, sorry for my voice, but my question is about, as we're talking about the future of the entertainment, it's curious how in the last some years, we see some lower budget movies getting good places in festivals, also in theaters, films as A24, and new productions. And of course, I know the history, the stories that they told are amazing, but also Formula One has an amazing story. So I would like to know, what do you think it's making this new movement to bringing lower budget films, lower budget movies to a new spotlight?
I think film festivals have a lot to do with it. You want to, you know, really educate yourself on the film festivals around the world. You know, people are so open-minded and so curious. So when you're making an independent film, because it may not have a star that the world knows, It may not be from a writer that you can't say from Oscar winning or BAFTA winning or whatever that case might be. If it's all new storytellers, then be very mindful of what film festivals you can get into. They do make a difference, and they give you the accreditation that you need to go to the next step. Because then you can put those little laurels on the side of your title and say, you know, official entry of this and official entry of that, winner of something else. So really lean into the festivals. Buyers are at those festivals. Do the homework as to which festivals bring in the most buyers and push it as best as you can into those festivals, and don't stop until you get into one of them. It might take a little while, but it's very important to do that. Some of the films I shot in my early career were sold at Sundance, you know, independently made and sold at these film festivals. So it really can work. And I think that people, once they know that a festival has celebrated that work, then people want to see it.
That's true. Like Anora did. Like Sean Baker started.
That's right, Sean Baker. And he's got how many Oscars now? Yeah.
Only for him.
Yeah. $7 million independent film.
Tem mais ali.
Right here. Good night, Glenn. Good night, everybody. Well, when we talk about the future of entertainment, we are also talking about the urgency of new narratives in face of a market that is very saturated with remakes and live action. In my, like, from my point of view, I think that creating space for underrepresented groups in cinema can be an alternative for the construction of new imaginaries. So I would like to know how receptive queer narratives are in the face of the conservatorism that is taking over Hollywood, especially talking about streaming platforms. I would like to know your point of view about this issue.
It's another great question, and I think that, you know, Hollywood is, for about 100 years, Hollywood has tried to respond to what audiences want. And, you know, I was very proud to be at Screen Gems and telling stories that had LGBTQ actors and showcase diversity as we did on many films, such as the film Think Like a Man, based on Steve Harvey's book Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. The thing is that there are so many important stories to be told that are about the LGBTQ community, and we are seeing them on screen, and we are seeing them being celebrated in award shows and by audiences, that you have to continue with that passion. I don't think it's a question of politics in Hollywood or around the world. People want to see good stories, and you know, they will be celebrated. And so I encourage you to continue to follow your passion. We don't know what the next hit's going to be, and I can promise you, you might have the next hit film. Again, film festivals love diversity and love different stories. We don't want to see superheroes at film festivals. We want to see something that inspires us. We want to feel the struggle. We want to try to understand what it means to be accepted or not accepted. And so what you talk about is probably one of the most important aspects of story. We don't root for the person who has it all. We root for the underdog. We always have. We want to see people be celebrated who have previously struggled. So in many ways, you have all the elements of a successful story.
We root for the underdog. Oh. That's very true.
Here. Sorry. My name is Thiago. I teach screenwriting here at FAP. And my students always are struggling with themes like what should I write about, and I always say, and I always say to them, write about something that you know, that you can feel. And about that you just said, I want to know, is there anything that makes you read a script, read something, and says, well, we got to greenlight this? Is there anything besides technique, besides being being well written, but is there anything else that I can bring back to my class and say, hey, I heard this guy and he works in the industry and he said, this is what makes a script being greenlighted?
I'd like to see something I haven't seen before, something I haven't felt before. I do remember reading scripts. Sometimes I get a script and it's a captain of a jet in the Army or the Navy, and he's this tough guy. And I read the script and go, okay, I've seen this. And I call the producer and say, could you make the guy a woman? Because that actually makes it a little more interesting for me, a little more dynamic. So I think it's fine to take stories that we might have seen before and flip it on its back and do something different. Because as the book, A Man with 1,000 Faces, has told us, there are 1,000 stories, there's only 1,000 faces, but it's by mixing it up that you get something that's very different. So I think you're right. You write what you know, but try to just change a dynamic. As I don't know if I said this tonight, but Hollywood has done two things very well in the last century. It unfortunately reinforced stereotypes, but it also inspired change. And it's the latter of the two that I think a lot of us want to achieve. So try to find the trope and inspire that change. If you know, think about what you're writing and think about what you're producing. Are you helping or are you hurting? Because if you reinforce a stereotype, you're probably hurting. If you're inspiring change, I was very proud of the films we did. They were popcorn movies, Underworld, Resident Evil. But why were they special? Because there were women on the poster at a time that wasn't common. I was very proud that we were putting Kevin Hart on the poster at a time when Hollywood wasn't celebrating Black Americans as they should have been. And this inspired change. And the kind of compliments that we'd receive were so personal. Even when Idris Elba played a serial killer in one of our films, an African-American colleague of mine said, thank you for putting Idris Elba as a serial killer, because I'm a black man and I never saw that on screen before, and I've always wanted to play a serial killer. So now I know I can. So just inspire change, but don't change everything. We need formats, because the human brain is trained that is what a movie is. It has 3 acts, and if you give them 5, they're confused. So just change it enough.
Alô?
Peraí, quem tá?
Aqui?
Peraí.
No fundão? Fundão?
Era ele ou era ela primeiro?
Yeah.
Ah, tá. Depois você, então. Tá.
Boa noite. Good night, Glenn. First, I want to say thank you, Marilia, to make this amazing first encounter for audiovisual. We really need this here every year. And I want to say, Glenn, if you understand how important is Amazon for us, because when you look at the big mainstreamings, we have very distant, far away conditions to make movies to those places. But when we see Amazon, we see a door, and I hope we continue to have there. And I think that's what makes Amazon so incredible. I watch Amazon, and I have movies already in Amazon. I'm inside the movies, and I see as a possible door for everyone. And when I've been to Rio to see, and I was quite sad because the Amazon studio are saying they want only true crimes, then I say, okay, goodbye. But when I heard you talking today, and you say you want the stories about São Paulo, and you want true stories and stories coming from the heart, that's what I believe in, makes me very happy, because that's what I see in Amazon. So I want to say thank you, and I hope to see you more in Brazil, because you have a perfect speech representing the company.
Thank you, and I hope I represent the community. And I want to again say, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but I do want to say thank you for everybody for these very powerful questions and challenging me to give you, I hope, thoughtful answers. None of this should be easy, and so thank you for the honesty, and I hope that this is helpful to all of us, because this is our opportunity. And it's not just, and thank you for what you said about Amazon. It's not just Amazon. There are other streaming companies and other studios and other filmmakers and producers and countries and co-productions. So many ways you can get your story told. And you just have to be open to all of these opportunities and understand that marketplace and really work that screenplay. That's really the trick, and really find the love in the story.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I think we have time for one more question.
I'm here.
Cadê a
Me,
Lídia?
here.
Lídia, tem ele. I'm just saying because we
Two questions.
Okay.
Hello, Ben. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Nick Story here from Stray Productions. We're a production services company. I've been here 20 years, and São Paulo is an amazing place. I completely agree with you. We have the whole of Brazil in São Paulo. It's amazing. But making films, the reality in Brazil right now is we are surrounded by producers, filmmakers, creators, and we make no money on our creations. You have a lot of, Brazil produces 100 films a year, and all the distributions, it's extremely difficult to launch a film. You make the film here in Brazil, and then you have no money for launching the film. You sell the license, and you give all of the rights to the VOD, and you have and your IP is stuck in a library, and it's worth nothing because you can't do anything with it. So the reality of making films in Brazil is extremely, extremely challenging. So when people say you can dream and everything, the time to make a film for us, for our series, which is on HBO Max, it's 10 years. 10 years. So you need to be able to make money, and even if you license to a VOD. So in Brazil, we are waiting for the signing of this VOD agreement, which is it's been 10 years in the works. And what we are facing in Brazil is the reality where the algorithm is the king in Brazil. We have 200 million people. YouTube is king, Instagram is king, influencers are king, and they're creating a lot of content very cheaply and barely making a living themselves. So is the future of entertainment, as we can see here in Brazil, is we work, but we make no money, and our life is just being a clown on the juggling balls, and maybe someone's going to see our art when we have very few, when all the distribution platforms are American, they're all based in California. So the algorithm game, we are in a world of attention, and Brazilian filmmakers are not making any money. Just a few big producers that's still working. But so we have the world to tell. There's a huge amount of potential. All the talent is here. We have so many talents. Is the future of entertainment towards a very cheap productions, and where we are all fighting for, like opera now it's a tiny slither of something, and people are just singing opera because they like to do opera, but they're not making any money. So is the future of making films just people that can afford to do it, or paid by the state and very cheaply powered by AI? I don't know. I'm very gloomy there, but it's very difficult to make films. It's very difficult to distribute them. It's very difficult, and we are 8 billion people. So, sorry to give you. Can you fight my negative wave here and give me some hope?
Yeah, and you're not alone, by the way, in this one. This is a global issue. This is not unique to Brazil. We talked about great Korean filmmakers. They're struggling. We want storytelling and the profession of storytelling to be repeatable. But we know all of us won't succeed in the art and the science and the business of storytelling. The reason why I'm optimistic is because your struggle is something I'm feeling wholeheartedly planet-wide. And when there's that kind of commonality, there will be a breaking point and a discovery. And I'm looking for that discovery as well. And that's why I spoke about the emergence of specific channels and the emergence of new opportunities where companies are focusing on genres in a specific way. And granted, they will probably have to piggyback on the larger companies to be seen at first. But we've got to not just look at this as a local issue. It is a global issue. And we've got to find a way to understand all the cultures and how they consume, how they spend, what their spending habits are. We know, for instance, in India, consumers don't like to pay upfront for something they haven't received. So how do we monetize that as a global industry? We know a lot of the countries on the African continent consume content differently. We know there are piracy issues that also diminish the value of what we make. And we're still battling the piracy issues. We have so much still to figure out so that you can have a repeatable business and sustain your lifestyle on producing. There's a good and there's a bad on every thing we look at. We're very blessed that we have global companies that have empowered storytelling as they have. That's the good news. And the bad news is that they have become necessary gatekeepers, just like the old studios in the 20th century. So we've got to find new opportunities together. You know, Hollywood has always been one of the toughest businesses in the world. Even when it was predominantly a Los Angeles business, show business was always tough. It's knowing that and looking around these curves for the future of entertainment and those new opportunities that I think we will find a sustainable business. It's a bit of a mystery too, and that pain you have is real, and I really, yeah. Yeah, but it's a real issue that we have to figure out globally. And again, we want all the companies that exist today, we want them to continue to be successful. How do we build next to them? How do we build around them? How do we uplift them, and how do we get uplifted with new opportunities?
Last question.
Hello, Flavia. Hello, Glenn. Thank you for this masterclass. My name is Lorena Mesquita. I am a Brazilian actress, filmmaker, producer from Amazonia. And first of all, I have just followed you, Glenn, on Instagram. I hope it's your right to you, and so you can keep in touch. And
I will DL you right away.
All right. So my main question is, as a smaller producer, I feel a fine line between us. I think it's the same feel about everyone here, maybe. And my main question for you is how Amazon Original Movies and Amazon Studios could help us to producer, to help these smaller producers with a co-production or labs or master classes. Do you have a program like this, or you think about, are you open-minded to receive projects from the smaller companies?
So I don't want to answer specifically for any one studio. They all have different business models. Amazon MGM has a certain business model. Their business model is going to make sense for what they're trying to achieve. You can imagine, you know, a lot of these American companies, these studios, they have to, in order to survive, make tentpole movies. The paradox, the irony about that is we as a community, we as independent filmmakers need, even if I leave Amazon or the studio system tomorrow and I become an independent filmmaker, I still need, as an independent filmmaker, these studios to make blockbusters. Otherwise, the movie theaters around the world go out of business. I've spoken about this, and I've been told this by filmmakers in Australia and other places, that if it weren't for, in the old days, if it weren't for Disney making those tentpole pictures, the independent filmmakers in Australia wouldn't have a movie theater to show their movie. So again, we need them to do what they do best. Warner Brothers makes Superman better than anybody. The independent filmmaker needs to make the independent film better than the studio. Studios that are based in Los Angeles can't possibly understand the nuances that you have. That is a skill set wholly unique to you, and it's not something that somebody driving to Burbank or Culver City is going to possess. So we need you to tell that story, and we need you to get it to the film festivals so that we as a community, whatever studio it is, can buy it and put it on a platform. Independent films have thrived for many years. 500 Days of Summer was a Fox Searchlight movie made for $5 million that grossed a lot of money in the box office. Independent films are independent, though. That's the paradox. People think, they get confused that every independent film is going to be a hit. That's not the independent film business. But it is the business that a lot of us are in. So understand that each one of us in the studios and the countries and everybody around the world, each community has a different skill set. The studios will make and must make the tent poles, and the independents must make the powerful independents so that they can buy that and keep the theaters full. Because the studios will make 4 or 5 or 6 tent poles, but that's not enough to sustain the movie theaters. They need all kinds of films and all kinds of stories.
Thank you, Glenn. I think to finish, if you want to share something more, but the way you talk make us think about an ecosystem. You know, it's not a plantation, it's an ecosystem. So I think we can work together to make this ecosystem healthier and healthier. I don't know if you agree, but
I fully agree, and I wanted to thank the Sao Paulo government for inviting me. You know, this is an incredible opportunity. You know, we all know there's no perfect legislation, there's no perfect country, but this is a perfect moment. And I'm very proud to be in this moment with everybody here because this is a start. And, you know, I think that we all know now, if we didn't know before, that we all have, just like we talked about feelings, we're all feeling the same stress. And identifying that stress is going to allow us to look around those corners. And we have to remain optimistic. Sure. Because we're artists, we're storytellers, and we have stories to tell.
That's why we're here. Obrigada, Glenn.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. Thank you for generosity, really. Thank you.